BBC4 Collections, archive programmes chosen by experts. For this collection, Simon Jenkins has selected programmes celebrating the people and places of London. More programmes on this theme and other BBC4 collections are available on BBC iPlayer.
London, 8 million people in a city 2,000 years old.
Until recently, the capital of the largest empire the world has ever known.
When you come here as a foreigner, you feel saturated in human action or traces of it, piled up solid by Londoners over centuries. Even in a row on the Thames, the muck in the river somehow obscurely seems much older than muck in any other city.
But in the last few years, a new London seems to have been born, at least in the minds of foreigners.
This new look came from America. Americans had always doted on traditional London. And now, in the notorious words of Time magazine, London has burst into bloom. It swings, it is switched on. Everything new, uninhibited and kinky is blooming at the top of London life.
It's fantastic, really. I like it very much, and all the persons I know love it.
Some magazines were unenthusiastic. The atmosphere in London, one of them said, can be almost eerie in its relentless frivolity. Britain seems willing to sink, giggling, into the sea. But what did Londoners think?
Well, I think that every city has its time for about 2 years at a time, and I think about 5 years ago it was Rome, and now it's London.
I think young people are much more able to enjoy themselves, and I think there's fun. Chelsea is very gay.
Yes. I think it's great fun. I think it's become, the press has caused it to be a slightly more concentrated sort of swinginess. I mean, it's much more commercial than it ever was before.
Well, I think this is something, you know, that has been a marvellous contrick, you know, sort of organised in a way, in which, you know, particularly the younger teenagers in this country have been made up, you know, by the people that run fashion and pop business and by the newspaper men, so they themselves have come to believe it.
I think it's the image of the miniskirts and the pretty Carnaby Street and things like that. I think that's what makes London swinging.
Well, I'm a sort of a suburban housewife. This swing in London really doesn't interest me.
I would say there is, yes. Yes, we're getting away. We've got to go on, haven't we? We don't go back. I would say there is. Yes, there's a new vogue coming out. Yes, I'm all for it myself.
There is no one London. Everyone who lives here has his own city, and there are just as many Londons as there are Londoners, or for that matter, visitors.
Now I come to London for 2 or 3 days at a time as a visiting journalist from Paris. This capital to me is too often the official business London of politics, newspapers and theatres. It's not artificial, not unreal, but it's limited, over-focused on personalities, official events, over-rapid too. I don't really know enough real Londoners.
Who built the canal? The French and the British. Who controls it? NASA. Who built Havana? The Americans. Who got it? That's true. Who's building Africa? The white. Who's going to get it? The black. Who built Oxford Street? The English. Who controls it? The Jews. Who built Buckingham Palace? The English. Who lives there? A Greek.
As a black South African living in exile, I find this a vastly comic open-air cabaret show. Yet beneath all that mock insult against the English, these blacks state the terms on which they would like to be accepted into English society. They know they have something unique to contribute. They want to be accepted, but they're not buying British at all costs.
And I want you to listen. You know what will wait for you, don't you? You don't have to be white to be decadent.
I live here instead of Australia because I make my living writing about art. If you want to talk about world art centres, there are only two, here and New York. Perhaps London's a bit too bland, but on the balance I do prefer it to the States. The material you have to work with here is very rich indeed. I like what English painters are doing, and I collect their pictures. London's totally, completely eclectic, and anything seems at least 3/4 possible. I can only write about the paintings that interest me strongly, and a lot of English art at the moment does. London looks like developing into a better place for young artists than it's ever been since the war, and that is another reason to stay. You're bombarded with sensations the whole time, things that demand to be evaluated. Actually, my big interest is the Italian Renaissance, and London has the great advantage of being 11,000 miles closer to my flat in Italy than Sydney is. Today we've all come together to look at this other London, the one the foreign magazines saw. And we'll spend the day at it, beginning in Carnaby Street.
The irony is that Carnaby Street, the mecca of swinging London, should be so tawdry and dull. The only thing colorful about it is the clothes.
About that. I mean, look at this sort of stuff, for instance. Yeah, it's not cheap. Well, it's very badly made. That's the objection to it. It doesn't last too.
There's now a sort of mini Carnaby Street in Paris, where they sell English stuff. There's even one in Rome. When I first saw the London Carnaby Street, I was fascinated. But now, really, I find it a bit grubby.
Have you ever noticed when it's raining how the longing for the sun to shine again?
I see you've got a lot of mock Victorian designs too.
Yes, for instance, you have here what I think you must have taken out of, say, a Victorian newspaper advertising the Kiva Corset. And yet you've taken it out straight, and during Victorian times, one feels that this was, you know, a straight advertisement, and you give it a slightly curious connotation. Why?
It's a change of sense of humour now. People find it amusing now, whereas it was a straight advertisement once. We found a lot of people buying the old Victorian things because of what was written on them. So now we have them done on almost everything.
I'm told that some of these motifs, the designs, don't sell so well, and yet others, you know, sell like hotcakes.
Yes. Well, the slightly kinky ones, that's a marvellous with lots of straps.
Oh, the lady with the straps all over her bust, yes.
Yeah.
Why, well, this thing sells very well.
Yes, that does. That's exactly a very good stuff.
Where the hell do you have the Union Jack all over the place?
We're proud to be British.
Come on. What is it, fundamentally? Nostalgia for the Empire?
Yes, it is. That's a good point, because it's a Boer War tea caddy which has been reproduced. Very much nostalgia, which makes people buy it quite a lot. And the Union Jack is
what kind of people?
A terrific variety of people, young people and old people who surely can remember the original.
Anything from a char lady to a retired colonel?
Yes, anything.
But what your shop is really about is camp, isn't it? This sort of half-mocking, half-affectionate look at what used to be produced 20, 30 years ago. What was produced 20 years ago is camp. What was produced 60 years ago, like Beardsley, is high fashion.
Yes.
This is permanent camp, isn't it?
You can say that. Certainly the cushions and the tea towels are very high camp, even down to, we've got some Batman and Robin T-shirts, which are sort of the epitome of camp.
God help us. Sorry, I'm obsessed by the flag. What I would like to know is why you don't put it on the numerous chamber pots that you've got.
Well, we're working towards that.
You're not being very surrealistic about it all, are you? I mean, that would be difficult.
It's difficult to
You dare not do it, simply.
It's difficult to get the manufacturers to put a flag on a chamber pot.
But you really feel you'd like to do it?
Oh, yes, why not?
Where do people buy chamber pots here? What do they use?
Do you actually really sell a lot of them?
Yes, we do. There's one type that has instructions printed in it, which is very good for serving or using as an ashtray.
What's that? Which one?
It's the slipper bed fan.
What are the instructions?
How to use it, actually, in case you don't know. But the other chamber pots sell very well to serve tossed salad in and fruit.
Do you want to listen to this from the Wonder Book of the Empire? London is the mother city of an empire whose children are scattered under every sky. Upon the king of this nation and his councillors rests a burden such as no other king has ever carried. It is the council chamber of the Commonwealth, to which millions of many races look with love and reverence. There have been many empires, but never one like this.
And that was only 30 years ago.
Colonial troops are great favorites all along the route. Not today shall we use the high-sounding phrase Commonwealth of Nations. Today we are a family whose lusty sons from the far corners of the earth gather to England's bosom.
And Lord Kitchener's empire has shrunk to this little measure.
Where do you have this stuff made?
It's all genuine, military stuff. The majority of it is, some of it is theatrical, but most of it is genuine.
Genuine?
Oh, yes, pre-First World War, most of it.
Where do you get it?
It's a military secret.
Do your customers come from a certain class, social class?
Well, let's say when it started, they did. It was more or less the beatniks and, these type of people who are always with the long hair who don't mind being stared at. But now, it more or less hits everybody, all just the ordinary kids, which go to the clubs in London,
I have a sort of puritanical reaction against dressing up. I have a vague feeling that people dress up not only to have good fun, but also because they long not to be themselves. You've had all this modern rocket business in England, and then the convict stuff. Now you're going back to prehistory, really, just straightforward history.
Yeah, well, it's their prehistory.
Thermidor, after the revolution. This is very Germanic.
Yes, it is Germanic. Well, this is the thing, you know. I don't think there's any sort of historical element involved.
Medal, too, huh?
Yeah, a little medal, which you didn't win. But it's a matter of prehistory. It's exactly like fancy dress. I remember when I was a kid, I used to go around in my grandfather's pith helmet, and that seemed absolutely remote from me. But the idea of dressing up in my father's Air Force uniform, say, would have been quite unthinkable.
And all these chaps have got a lot of young people, and none of them have been in the army.
None of them have ever been in the army.
They want to go in.
I get a sort of ironic pleasure out of seeing them paying £5 or so for uniforms which I would have paid 50 quid not to have to wear when I was doing military service.
Hey, why don't they have United States uniforms?
They do have United States uniforms. I think they're over there.
Yeah, but do they sell? Where's John?
I don't know whether they sell or not.
Yeah, they do.
They do.
Do all the
Who do they
uniforms
sell
sell
to?
as much as English uniforms? A lot of people convert them into German uniforms and that sort of.
Why do they convert them into German uniforms? Do they all want to be little Germans, or?
No, it's quite a fad at the moment, the German uniform being the most prominent of all.
Well, is this like this thing that the kids are doing in Southern California, wearing swastikas and...
Yes, yeah,
Nazi
the Iron
armbands?
Cross and that sort of thing, you know, they're very popular.
Do you think they've got any sort of fascist or sadistic desires, or...?
I hope not.
Wearing an old uniform is a dandy's gesture. Once the dandy has made it, it can't be done again. The squares take it up. So the dandy must find another gesture. If he hasn't much money, he has to find it cheap. And hence the importance of junk. 5 or 10 years ago, you could always find something beautiful and well made in Portobello Road and buy it dirt cheap. Now it's mostly junk and tat. The swinging London myth is based on expendability. And nothing is more expendable than fragments of a past which you and your friends don't share. Every brassing stand and lead gnome in the Portobello has a giggle lurking somewhere behind it.
Probably what you don't know.
Hey? I'm not very lucky, you know, with anything that comes in.
This is a piece of sculpture.
Some junk isn't cheap. Old cars, for instance. The beat-up Jag or the 30s Pontiac has a camp value, though it's got no vintage status at all. You have to pay for camp, this mocking but affectionate way of accepting dated things which have no particular real value. And camp transforms the past into theatre. Cars. There They're a beautiful example of the way London can strangle itself in its own myth of progress. Ram 2 million metal boxes into a town plan that was never meant for them, and you instantly have chaos. Nobody laughs but the oil companies. It might be nice to destroy the lot, but that, of course, is only a dream.
London girls are like lollipops. London girls are like tropical fish in a frozen tank.
They're really like gazelles.
I don't know, here you can, for example, you can wear whatever you want. You know, in Brazil, no, you can't wear very short skirts or hats. You can't, and here, anything.
Yes.
You accept everything.
Well, the clothes are more up to date down here. They tend to be too, well, I don't know how to say it, but they always seem to wear the same up in the north. They don't bother to change to get with it, so to speak. I think there's a tremendous search for individuality, which in fact is making us all look exactly the same.
Well, I think because we're far ahead in the fashions now, you know. People think of us as the swinging city, you know, because Carnaby Street started it off, and so you can walk anywhere now and wear anything you like.
Well, yes, I think that if you look around, you see lots of girls with short hair, and then in a week's time they're all wearing freckles, and then the next week they're all wearing the glasses on their heads or something different. And people now shop to buy dark glasses to put on their heads instead of on their noses.
Instead of being told what to think by your parents, you're now told what to think by the magazines and the movies.
But I'd like to live in Victorian England, and I don't really like London at the moment.
When James Boswell came down to London for the first time from Scotland 200 years ago, he wrote, "London is undoubtedly a place where men and manners can be seen to the greatest advantage. Here we behold as fine women as were ever created, from the splendid madam down to the civil nymph with white thread stockings who tramps along the Strand and will resign her engaging person to your honor for a pint of wine and a shilling. After a moderate share of the pleasures of London, a man has a much better chance to make a rational and unprejudiced marriage." Don't even need the shilling these days.
I think that young people's attitude is only for themselves. I think they care much less for old people now than they used to. I think the home is not an entirety like it used to be.
After all, the church and its laws are based on theory and this sort of marriage and moral affair is just reverting back to Stone Age, more or less, isn't it? Have any woman you want, when you want.
And a woman can approach a man on a completely level sexual basis. Of course, she's not going to get pregnant. Simple as that.
Well, women have to be too much like men now, I think. They have to stand up for themselves, and so men don't respect women.
Please, may I have my book back?
I beg your pardon. Is this your book?
Yes, it is.
I happen not to believe you.
I promise you it is.
How can you prove it's yours?
Well, I left it here on the bench.
Can you tell me what's inside?
You've been reading it, haven't you?
No, I've not. I've just started looking at the pictures. I'm fonder of the pictures than I am of the story.
Well, please may I have my book back?
What's your name?
Elena. Thank you.
Bye.
All feminine women respond to a certain amount of, well, not necessarily sadism, but certainly the man being in charge of the situation. And I think that's as it should be, and I think that's as it always will be, even if we wear trouser suits every day and every night, and even if we work and earn as much money as the man. I think just instinctively that will be the way round, that it will be.
Well, yeah. Very 19th century, but lighter. Much nicer, in fact.
I like this kind of light, fluffy stuff. It looks good on women. This is one revival I am very much in favour of, actually, Olivier. Yes.
Fluffy?
Fluffy. No, I don't mean the little bit of fluff. I think that's gone out. You don't talk about girls in terms of little bits of fluff anymore. They exist.
I don't know. I associate this fluffiness with a certain type of sensuality. In France, we've had more fashion revolutions than republics in the last few years. But no, but nothing quite as sensual as the stuff you get in London. I don't know what it is exactly. I may be suffering from the exotic effect when I come over here, but frankly, probably mainly due to clothes, I find London much more sensual than Paris. Not smarter.
I arrived in this country 5 years ago, and then, you know, the English were looking terribly drab.
And sad.
Yes, and there was an idea. I mean, I think one felt it, even if it wasn't, you know, sad to you, you know, that to be pleasurable, you know, was not nice, and to rivet the attention, you know, to your body, you know, was also art. But now, I mean, the young people, I mean, live to be looked at almost. You know,
to be looked at?
Yes.
Looked at only.
But you were asking about, you know, why this should appear sensual in this context. To me, it appears far more sensual than it does, for instance, at Saint-Tropez, where you have the sun, you have an environment in which you expect people to go around with a minimum of clothing. In London, the most unnatural possible garment is the miniskirt. It's freezing cold half the time.
Yeah, mind you, when it's freezing cold, I would drop it.
But what is unfair, I mean, to a stranger is to see all these, you know, fantastic, I mean, sort of really beautiful girls all over the place, and how do you make contact with them? I mean,
you use your wits.
Well, what's...
but look, is there not this...
What is unfair about it? Come on.
Well, I mean, there ought to be...
We don't want to get into the Swedish myth.
Look, in Africa, in South Africa,
summer of happiness, God help us.
You can, if you are in a train with a woman...
Where?
In South Africa, for
yes.
instance. If you're in a train with a woman, it doesn't matter whether she's terribly ugly. She could be as unprepossessing as possible, but it is the duty of the male, you know, to make her feel that she's wanted by society. In other words, you know, you have to say, you know, you're beautiful, you know, you
actually
say
flirt,
that,
do you?
Yes, you flirt, but it's not supposed to be taken very seriously. I mean, it could turn out to be serious, but you know, it doesn't have to be. But I mean, that means that the society creates opportunities for contact, and you don't feel that, you know, you're irrelevant, you know, to other people. And here, I mean, you're looking at a beautiful person, and you just want to go and tell her, you know, look, I think you're stunning. And the society has created so many inhibitions, you know, you can't do that because it's considered rude.
lot of these young boys and girls do look alike, but only up to the neck.
I'm delighted to see this long hair thing back, you know. I don't have any difficulty at all in telling him apart. Listen.
Well, it's not as widespread as it might be commonly supposed to be anyway. A lot of young people are really very conventional.
Yes, but you get this fashion for extremely long hair among the boys and short among the girls, radiating out from a kind of node. I think it becomes diluted as it gets out through the suburbs, don't you?
I mean, you've got this large mass living here, adapting what a style-setting clique somewhere in Chelsea is doing. So what happens is fashions get anonymous. They turn into a new sort of conformity.
But you know, Bob, not only are the suburbs dreary, even the so-called gay swinging London still lacks amenities like the European-style cafe where you can meet practically everybody.
Yeah, it does. I don't think the pub's much of a substitute for that, do you?
No, as a matter of fact, my main fantasy is waking up one morning to find London littered with that kind of cafe where I can rub shoulders with practically anybody I admire, famous and infamous.
But what we're all determined to do is to see that Britain can advance industrially without lurching into boundaries.
I'm sure that our meeting will have made a great difference to friendly cooperation.
Unfortunately, I think we're a dying country, and it's like Rome just before the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Yes. I think so. Unfortunately, it's so, but I think it's marvellous to live here now, but I don't feel there's any hope for the future, really, for England.
Well, I think so. Probably more of a freer life these days.
Ah, yes, I pick up on that. Yes, freer life, yes.
And I think the reason for this is that people are banging in as much as they can do in one particular time. Than,
yes, I agree with you. Yeah.
I mean, you've got a threat of a nuclear war hanging over you. So people say, well, let's live for the present, damn it.
No, I can't find swinging London at all, actually. It's in the shop windows, but it's not in the streets.
It seems very exciting when you don't live here, but as soon as you get here, it's excitement, I think.
I think that it's missed just to say that, London's swinging, but if you really bring this down, there is one small section of the community, there's a few young people that have a certain way of life. Yes. That's all you can say about it.
After all, you know, people who live in that kind of place, dreary suburbias, how swinging are they, in fact?
Yes, but there are some guys like Arnold Wesker, for instance, who are trying to do something to put a little bit of cultural leaven into that mass.
But it appears that Arnold Wesker is not just interested in providing the conventional type of theatre, that he wants to put into this new building is what? A theatre, restaurants, galleries, and just places to sit and think in, if you can think. Arnold Wesker, as a playwright with a social message, it seems to me that one of your central ideas was that you hoped socialism in this country would result in a certain amount of loosening up of the society, a certain amount of color, a certain amount of vitality. Do you feel that your hopes have been realized in the present generation of Englishmen, or do you see what is going on as a kind of perversion of your hopes?
You straight away put your finger on something that I'm terribly confused about. As a writer, you'll know that secretly, when one writes plays like Chicken Soup, one would love people to go out and start a revolution immediately. They don't. The reasons behind writing a play like Chicken Soup are many. One was because all of us were aware in that period of the terrible grayness and drabness of not only life, but particularly socialist attitudes. And it seemed to me that the early spirit of socialism that I was familiar with, and one doesn't want to hang on to the past for the sake of the past, but it did contain a kind of spirit and a wish for color and the developing of all that marvelous potential that human beings had. But it took years for me to discover a very important thing about art, and that is that its effect. I think a lot of us are only just realizing this, that the effect of art just isn't immediate. It's accumulative, and it takes its effect over generations.
But is this what is happening now amongst the young people? Is this part of the accumulation?
Now, about this I'm not sure. On the one hand, one looks at those pop programs on television and sees those lovely faces of youngsters, and you think, my God, there is the new generation, how marvelous, it's all going to happen. And you see Carnaby Street and you think, yes, there's color, there's movement, there's a breakthrough of some sort. And then you look closely at the Carnaby Street clothes, and they're tatty, and they don't last long. And there's something ephemeral about all that's happening. Well, and then when sorry, just to finish, and then when the Beatles are exploited in the way they are, and one thinks of what the Beatles could have done.
What could they have done?
They have such an extraordinary position in society that there's almost nothing that they couldn't have done, from the harnessing of the money of youngsters to send to underdeveloped countries or starvation areas, to the creation of a dozen centers like this. I mean, with a snap of their fingers, they could have done so much. But they have a kind of, they've developed a kind of, the coolness which was intended to be a rebellion against the establishment has developed into a cynicism. All I do know is that there is inherent in English society this mechanism for rendering impotent by applause everything new and exciting that happens.
In a nightclub like this one, nothing is as cool as a Negro on the dance floor. Not that there is anything special about a colored club, but what Negroes have done is to smuggle in a more direct sensuality and a certain sharpness and grace.
After that, I expect to see Osbert Lancaster.
You mean the cartoonist?
Yes.
You know him?
No.
Well, let's go and see if he's in.
Candidly, frankly, how do you feel about the new gay London?
Well, it's all that new. Once every 10 years, on the average, in my experience.
But how does it compare with the London of the bright young things before the war?
Well, it's on a much larger scale. There are a great many more people. The place is much more crowded and less intimate, as it were. And secondly, of course, the young, a larger section of the young, have got far more money than they had in the 20s.
Now, how do you feel about that?
Well, I'm always pleased, and I'd like everybody having money.
So, what is the fuss about? You know, what's all this stuff about swinging London, according to you?
Well, I think it's a phenomenon that occurs about once every 10 years or so.
Not about London, surely.
Oh, yes, there's always leader writers start off, what is wrong with the youth of today? I mean, a number of times I've heard what's wrong with the youth of today. I mean, 1919 onwards.
Yeah, what did they say then? What did they say after 1919?
Living in pleasure, living for pleasure, no sense of responsibility, I mean, all.
It was the same theme?
It was the same theme. Well, only then, of course, combined to a far smaller section of the population.
That's it, the pleasure ride has gone down now.
Yes, I mean, it's spread.
Did it have the very strong, well, sexual implications then that it has today?
I was always thought to have. I don't. Yes, but that is a change. I mean, the four-letter words now occur everywhere in print. I mean,
no, those are words. What about the facts?
Well, I think I've always held very firmly to the view that at any period in the world's history, the amount of adultery, fornication, and homosexuality that goes on remains absolutely constant. The only thing that changes is people's attitudes to it and the amount they say about it or talk about it.
And how do the attitudes in the 20s and in the 60s compare?
Well, I mean, now, I mean, this is much more permissive. I mean, anything goes. But, and the point is that song, Anything Goes, was written in the 30s.
And are you for or against it on the whole?
Well, I get awfully bored. I mean,
bored by what?
Well, I mean, you know, stay me with flagons, comfort me with apples, for I'm sick of sex. I mean, really, it's every paper you open. I mean, there's somebody or other. I mean, Miss Bridget Brophy is discussing technique for the young, or I mean, really.
What do you object to there?
I find it's just cracking awful bore. I'm not that interested in what other people do in bed. I mean, let them get on with it. I don't really want to have every paper always full of more sexual advice. I mean, the amount of advice this generation's had about sex, I wonder if they ever get down to it at all.
Yes. Now, of course, you've lost the empire now.
And
there's a...
we've lost the empire.
What I want to ask you is, has this loss of empire and the notion of going abroad for the young men, for duty, to other people, has it made the English to turn more inward toward themselves and to think more about the pleasures of the body, about the pleasures of life?
I think there probably is. There's a sort of glorious feeling that the white man's burden is now off one's shoulders. That one need no longer maintain.
Because this would reduce Kipling to tears.
There's people watching one the whole time. I mean, what will the locals think? I mean, I think that it had a very, very liberating influence, I think.
I've always associated the English in London with a kind of calm madness, some form of accepted eccentricity. I still find it here. The London fashion bubbling is part of a cycle. I think it'll wash away. Now, people here don't strike me as being more permissive or wilder than in Paris. Their manners are definitely easier, freer, less hypocritical than in the post-war London I knew. Then, for a student, what to do in the evening was quite a problem.
I think that London has now the vitality, the color, and even a new extravagance that I like. There is that nervous expectation that something exciting is about to happen in the next pub or street corner.
But the buildings and the squares remain, and so do the institutions. Old London stays recognizable. No discotheque can really change that. The energies of New London, whether they're creative or, at the other side, merely anarchic, seem larger when you see them against this traditional backdrop. People talk about a revolution, but below the surface, very little has changed.